Well, good morning and welcome to the February 21st worship service at Highland Congregational Church. We're glad that you can join us whenever you might be watching this, and we hope that this will be a blessing to you in the same many ways that God is always seeking to bless us. Hear these words of hope in the middle of God working some real mess. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth that is with you, as many as came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between you and me and every living creature that is with you for all future generations."
Our reading today is from Psalm 25, verses 1 through 10. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me. Do not let those who wait for you be put to shame. Let them be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love, for they have been from old. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me, for your goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right. He teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and for his decrees.
Today is the first Sunday in the season of Lent, the annual time that many churches worldwide practice 40 days of considering and following in the example of Jesus. These days go on until Easter Sunday, when Christians shout, "He is risen!" and celebrate that death has indeed lost its sting. Also, everybody eats a lot of chocolate. I encouraged you last week to take time afresh to listen to Jesus, who was transfigured before his very confused followers, Peter, James, and John. And I do affirm again that Lent best works as a discipline in considering Jesus in the midst of our very real world lives, our joys and sorrows, our hopes and dreams, and perhaps most importantly, in our sufferings. So it would make sense that I would preach from the Gospels. It's Lent, after all. It's about Jesus. But I'm not going to do that this season, not until Palm Sunday anyhow. I will be working and teaching for the next 5 weeks the assigned Psalms in the lectionary, all really good ones, among the songs that Jewish people learned and sang as they related to their God and ours. In the Psalms, we hear them give voices to their experiences, good, bad, and ugly, with their God. The Psalms demonstrate their worldview. They are what has been called sung theology. Also, Jesus liked the Psalms and taught from them a lot, which is good enough for me. Today's Psalm 25 is an acrostic. In this case, each verse starts first with a word whose first letter is sequential from the Hebrew alphabet. Think of crossword puzzles with answers from A to Z. It's exactly the same. Acrostic form is a device that is designed to help people learn to remember the content. Think of an older saint whose memory is fading, or a younger person who's learning the words for the first time. If you forget a line, you can pause for a moment and know that it starts with a letter. E, F, G, that's right. God, you are my God in whom I trust. In Psalm 25, we find the psalmist in a tough place. There are verses beyond the ones in our lectionary portion that fill out the whole work. In verse 16, we hear that they are lonely and afflicted, a simple way of summing up the struggles that they are encountering. There's much to indicate that the psalmist is in this place, in good part because of their own doing. There is plenty of mention of sin, transgression, and guilt. Whatever is going wrong in their life is to a good extent self-caused. There is no presumption of any moral high ground with the psalmist here. There is a realistic and honest humility. But to add to it, clearly there are also some foes who are rubbing their hardship into their face and doing them ill. Verse 19 speaks of the violent hatred with which they are treating our poor psalmist. These are not the words of one who is enjoying a season of plenty. Such a state is the backdrop for what comes before. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Again, it's a bald-faced plea. Help! I need it badly. It's the Star Wars moment, voiced by Princess Leia. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. It's a statement of trust, and it's also a statement of some desperation. We can say that it's a trust that is looking for more. What more? The psalmist is clearly wanting God to do something. Just do something. The psalmist's trust is in the Lord's activity. The primary actor needed now is God. At this point, I turn to the notion of covenant, which is shot throughout our psalm. The primary conception of how the God of Israel relates with the people, individually and collectively. In our time, we talk more of contracts as ways to make concrete how two parties will work together, the responsibilities and the benefits entailed. Covenants are contracts too, though within expanded relational dimension. The covenants that are most known to us in our time are probably weddings, when two unique parties happily throw their lot together before God and before people. There are requirements and demands and mutual benefit. It is reciprocal to some degree. In the ancient Near East, covenants that have been studied have demonstrated something familiar to all of us. In those places, as with many of them, the party with more power enjoys the more favorable terms of engagement. A serf pledges his allegiance to a local wealthy lord type in exchange for protection. The serf perhaps provides labor in the field or something like it in order to keep the manor supplied with food. The lord type will include the serf in the circle of defense against outside threatening forces. If the serf doesn't fulfill his part of the deal, he's probably out of luck. The lord type can easily dismiss a lagging serf and find another one. There's plenty of cheap labor where that came from. Supply and demand. What is different about the covenants that the Lord God of Israel makes with people such as Abraham and Moses, and yes, David, is that they don't actually have to do that much in return. The burden to act is primarily on the Lord, by far the more powerful party in the deal. That is the unique nature of what the people of Israel find in relationship with their God. So it's fine to plead for help. And here the psalmist, David maybe, Ask for help and guidance during a time of painful days. Lead me, teach me, instruct me are the types of requests that are shot throughout our verses. For this, the psalmist in return waits. This clearly shows that there is a willingness to change and be changed, to learn anew, to become something and someone different. And that, my friends, is the challenge as one ages past the sins of one's youth and has a long road increasingly behind. Internal change is never easy. Maybe it becomes harder later. Few things impress me more at this stage of my own life than watching and learning from elders who are still seeking to grow, to learn, and to change in their latter years. As long as we're alive, it's possible. So you say there's a chance? Absolutely. While our bones grow harder and more brittle with age, our muscles and tendons tighten and weaken, our souls need not follow suit. Our psalmist gets this. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love, for they have been from of old. Conversely, I must note, I find it sad sometimes to witness the ways in which people have defined themselves in either successes or failures from decades past. It can be a form of self-imposed captivity. The sins and wounds and triumphs of long ago can persist long after their occasion. The love of the Lord can be limited or even shut out with too much past preoccupation. But God sticks with it. God sticks with us. This is the covenant from the Lord's side, that the steadfast love of the Lord persists, yet more strongly. A loving God is still at work, and it's our great claim that it is, in fact, as Lamentations says, new every morning. It's nice to know, very nice to know, that the Lord's persisting love is there when things are going well. And it may be even more useful when they're not going well. So again, I'll turn to history. We have Mayflower Hall here at Highland Congregational Church, which commemorates the experience of the Pilgrims of Plymouth starting in 1620. To be honest, the Pilgrims picked the wrong neighborhood in which to settle, as the limits of fresh water would make large-scale colonization and farming difficult for them. 10 years later, in 1630, and a mere 40 miles to the north, another group of religious dissidents and economic opportunists arrived in Boston, where the water was better and there was more of it. They stuck, and the Boston Bay Colony would become the catalyst of the English colonization of America in all of its complexities. These Puritans would have their own spin on a lot of things that have proven foundational, good, bad, and ugly, in America over the course of these past 390 years since their arrival. These were the people who hoped to create what we call a shining city on the hill, as John Cotton preached, or to become a model of Christian charity, as the third governor of Massachusetts and, frankly, early colonial power broker John Winthrop would call their experiment. I find myself fascinated by early colonial history and its people, as I have since I was a child when our family spent parts of several summers in the area. This is where, from a church standpoint, the congregational heritage was birthed. The colonists wished to live freely from the state of England, and yet more freely still from the constraints of the Church of England, to do it themselves, as it were. Of course, freedom for me doesn't guarantee freedom for you. On this matter, time has clearly shown our congregational forebears to have been much less generous in granting religious and soul freedom to dissenters in their midst than they were wishing to be treated themselves. It was particularly tough to be a non-conforming woman at that place and time. Flash ahead 6 decades to the neighboring Salem of the 1690s and the infamous witch trials, which were neither models of Christian charity nor of common sense. But think of what they demonstrated about the women, the value of women as being children of God. It wasn't good. The Church of Boston in the mid-1630s had their own women problems, primarily in what I call the dynamic duo of Anne Hutchinson and Mary Dyer. Not coincidentally, these two are the only bronze statues of women at the Massachusetts State House grounds in Boston. Both are worthy of longer teachings and exploration in themselves, and Anne Hutchinson, who was labeled by the same John Winthrop as the American Jezebel, will probably show up in further sermons. I appreciate her. But Mary Dyer is who came to mind for me when I was working with Psalm 25. Mary Dyer initially got in trouble with the civil and religious authorities of the Boston Bay Colony for walking alongside Anne Hutchinson as Anne Hutchinson was being banished from the colony in 1637. The two women and their families, having been kicked out of the colony and excommunicated from the Boston church for holding heretical views, heretical at the time, that are now common to most Christians worldwide, these folks quickly headed south and received refuge in the new colony of Rhode Island. Their crime? That God might occasionally speak and relate to them individually. That they were able to receive personal inspiration and love from God apart from that mediated by established, recognized, and ordained, and yes, very male ministers. Think of all the power I could have had. No. Mary Dyer couldn't keep herself from continuing to come back to Boston over the years, despite a growing sense and threat of consequences. Compounding her initial heresy, she had converted to Quakerism, where the divine light truly was located within oneself, free from the mediation or control of anyone else. All civil and religious authorities who imposed otherwise were literally seen as thwarting the individual's covenantal relationship with God. This Mary wanted to point out to the good folks of Boston. So the inevitable came to pass. Despite the protestations of her husband and family, Mary Dyer returned again for that time which she was captured, tried, found guilty, and she headed to the gallows on June 1st of 1660. There on the ladder, with the noose tied around her neck, she was given her final opportunity to recant, lest she be guilty of her own death. This was her response. Nay, I came to keep blood guiltiness from you, desiring you to repeal the unrighteous and unjust law of banishment upon pain of death, made against the innocent servants of the Lord. Therefore my blood will be required at your hands who willfully do it. But for those that do it in the simplicity of their hearts, I do desire the Lord to forgive them. I came to do the will of my Father, and in obedience to his will, I stand even in death. Thus, she was hanged. Wouldn't it have been easier for Mary Dyer to falsely confess, to sell out, to shut up, to put her still attached head down, and to go forth quietly? practicing whatever she wanted according to the dictates of her conscience down in the haven that was Rhode Island? It's a fair question. But Psalm 25 doesn't gloss over sufferings, nor does Lent, nor does Jesus. Psalm 25 is attributed to David, which brings a weight to it, as he was the guy for the Jews, a man after God's own heart, it says in 1 Samuel 13. And he was the pinnacle of their collective aspirations for people. For Christians, Jesus comes from the lineage of David. So this is a great psalm to consider as we start Lent. Read it for yourself. Pray it for yourself. Sing it for yourself. Receive it for yourself. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love. Amen. Even though many of you have not been to church in a long time, even physically, I did want to take this chance to say that there's a lot of different things going on at the church, the physical property of the building and the grounds. It was this last week when we were doing our Ash Wednesday service that I really realized that many people hadn't been there for, in some cases, almost a year. And we have a lot going on right now. The roofs are being replaced for all the flat surfaces of the church building. And there's going to be a lot of landscaping, new irrigation systems are being put in. There has been a number of sidewalks poured that are ADA compliant and that will be able to serve in a number of different ways for giving greater access to the facility for people. In all of this, I want to thank you for your support, because as it seems like we're not together, there are many things being done. I want to thank Emil Marzullo, our moderator, for overseeing so much of the rehabilitation of the facility and the improvements that will be made that will serve well for several decades to come. So if you want to come by and just, in a socially distanced way, mask up and see what's going on, feel free to do so. But do know that there's many things are happening that will serve the church well and the people and many others for some time to come. Thank you for your support. Hang in there. Now, as we go forth today, Hear these good words from Psalm 121, verses 5 through 8. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Amen. Go in peace.